My name is Gerald Huggins. I own GH Enterprises, an aircraft maintenance facility here in Baton Rouge. I was born in Costa Rica, and I was raised in Guatemala and Panama, and then when I was 15, I immigrated to the United States. Growing up in a third world country like Guatemala or Panama or even Costa Rica, it allows me to, or has allowed me to identify with those people and feel their pain, because I was one of those kids at one point. And I remember I always wanted to help. I always wanted to do something constructive. For a long time I used to say, you know, my purpose here in this world has not yet been defined, but little did I know that my purpose really has already been defined, and that is dedicating myself to being the feet and hands and feet of Jesus. Back about 4 years ago, I had the good fortune to meet a couple of young ladies. I knew that they were going to Nicaragua and doing some service there. And through them, I connected with Judy Godin, who, as soon as she found out that I could speak Spanish and be a translator for them, she said, "Hey man, you gotta come with us to Nicaragua." So I got connected, went on the first mission. Immediately after we got back on that first mission, she calls me up, and she's so full of enthusiasm, and her energy level is so high, you know. She says, "I really want you to meet this guy. He's a really neat guy. You got to know him. You got to meet him. His name is Ryan Williams." And I'm going, "Oh yeah, it's some yo-yo."
My name is Ryan Williams. I'm a co-founder and co-owner of an insurance agency here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So at my home church in central Louisiana, I was at a men's meeting, and I meet a guy named Gerald Huggins, a young lady that goes to our church that formed an organization that's really fond to my heart called Team Hope Missions. Miss Judy Godin introduced me to Gerald, and we hit it off immediately. And I knew there was a connection there. Over the years, we were able to go to the mission field, and our relationship grew stronger. On a trip to Guatemala in October of 2013, I returned home from that trip, and God impressed upon me to get a pilot's license. And I'm a dreamer. I come up with stuff all the time, and never in my life did any of it include an airplane or me in it. So I began to question God. I began to ask why. You know, I felt like he had missed the mark, and I think we can all agree that he doesn't miss the mark. Not too long after that trip, our pastor approached me about hosting a life group in our home. I prayed about that and felt that was something that God wanted my wife and I to do. So through that life group, he began to bring people into our lives, and there was a Sunday that we had a sign up, and various people from the church were signing up for the life group. And a gentleman by the name of Tim Dixon signed up for the life group.
My name's Tim Dixon. I'm a safety professional in the petrochemical industry. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. April the 6th, 2010, God opened the door and allowed me the opportunity to move to Ashland, Kentucky. After moving to Ashland, Kentucky, I felt the calling to get a pilot's license. So after a couple years of flying and living up there, the church that I attended, Wildwood First Church of God in Ashland, Kentucky, had the opportunity to go on a mission trip to Guatemala. The day we landed in Guatemala, I felt that calling that I needed to combine my pilot experience with missions. Soon after that, God opened the door for me to move back home to Louisiana. Started back at Journey Church, where I had attended before moving away, and met Mr. Ryan Williams in a sign-up for registration for life groups.
So our life group meets every other Sunday, and the Saturday before that first life group meeting, Gerald and I hooked up and went for a flight. And I invited him to come to that life group meeting the next day. And he did. It was the first meeting. It was fantastic. We had a number of people show up, And as he's leaving that evening, he says to me, he says, Ryan, next time you want to go flying, let me know. Well, Tim overheard this conversation, and he asked me, he says, Ryan, he says, that guy flies? I said, yeah, not only does he fly, he owns a maintenance facility at the Baton Rouge airport. So Tim says to me, I have an airplane, it's in Kentucky, and I'm looking for a good mechanic. And I said, you own an airplane? Well, here we go, right? 2 hours later, we're sitting at the kitchen table talking about what God had laid on my heart only 28 days before that to get a pilot's license. And by the time this story is done, I'm in tears. And Tim is obviously can tell that, man, God is working on this guy about this airplane. And he says to me one of the most amazing things. He says, Ryan, if God is leading you to get a pilot's license, you can use my plane. Now you can imagine, I've known this guy. This is the second time I've met him. He's in my home. God's impressed upon me to get a pilot's license, and he manifests an airplane in 28 days. It just blows my mind how faithful God is when we're obedient to what it is he asks us to do. Through conversation and some back and forth, Gerald agrees to fly us up there along with another of Tim's friends to pick the airplane up. So we fast forward this story. The airplane is here. It's come back from Kentucky where Tim used to live. Gerald has so graciously allowed us to work on the airplane and get it tuned up to 100% and ready for what it needs to look like for a student pilot to spend the time and be safe and do it effectively. Gerald comes to me and he's sharing with me that God's placed a mission on his heart to take and distribute Bibles through Latin America, down through Mexico, all the way to Guatemala and Nicaragua. And I could see the passion on his heart to make this happen. And God just really impressed upon me that we can't have Gerald just leaving with Bibles and not telling this story.
My name is Daniel Waghorne, and I'm a photographer and videographer from New Orleans. I sat down one week and I basically prayed, God, let me be able to use my camera work for you. Let me be able to impact other people and not just what I'm currently doing. And I got a call the next week from Bernie Moore asking me to go to India with him and do some photography and video work. So I jumped on that. And this past year, God has blown that up completely out of proportion. We've gone multiple times to Kenya, India, Uganda, Guatemala. This past trip when we were in Guatemala this October, I met a group of people there from Journey Church, specifically Ryan and Gerald. And Gerald was pitching this idea one day with Ryan at the table and saying how he planned to fly to Guatemala in this little two-person plane that essentially can fit 2 small children comfortably and just go down passing out Bibles. And that really, to me, it spoke to me from an evangelical standpoint where Jesus just says, go out and preach the gospel. And at that point, I felt this pull of, I have to go do that. So I asked him, what are you doing for video? And he goes and says that he's attaching a couple GoPros to the plane. I'm like, that's not gonna happen. Like that's cool and all, but how would you feel if I traveled with you to document this?
So I think back to my kitchen table when I'm talking to Tim, how God manifested an airplane. And I watch right here 1 year later, God manifest a man whose heart is to serve him enough to take a month away from his family to document this trip. And it was confirmation for me that we couldn't just let Gerald go. You can't just do something like this without documenting it, without making sure people know. It's a simple act of obedience that allowed God to begin to put the pieces of the puzzle that He had already planned together to birth what is today Wings of the Spirit. So here's where we are. 900 Bibles. 900 to be distributed between Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and somewhere in a final resting place in Latin America. we need your help. We're asking for you guys to sponsor these Bibles to help bring this trip. And I want you to think about these Bibles not as just 900 Bibles, but as 900 souls. That where this airplane is going to go, they may have never seen a missionary. They may have never heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. And those little Bibles, a little paperback book, could change not only their life, but generations of people in these villages where Gerald and Daniel are going to go. So check us out at wingsofthespirit.org. All of the social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, and such. Talk about it with your friends. There are very specific prayer requests on that website. We've been covering this mission in prayer for months now. We're asking you to join hands with us, to stand beside us, to pray for these guys, to watch what's going on, to be a part of this mission with us. We appreciate you, we appreciate your support, and we also appreciate the opportunity to bring this video to you today.